I've been living in Europe for the past 10 years and traveling around the world even longer. But this is the American suburb that made me who I am, and it's why I had to leave. Hello from the future, back home in Berlin after spending 10 days visiting my hometown in Northeast Ohio. Where I grew up is in many ways the polar opposite of where I live now. Here I'm on a beautiful city street with sidewalks, parks, and easy access to public transportation. But I'm a firm believer that the places we're from shape us the most. So I thought I'd take you with me and show you my hometown and explain why I still credit it for giving me the life I have today here in Berlin. But hey, if you are new here, my name is Joe Bauer. I'm a German immigrant from Cleveland, Ohio. I make weekly videos that try to close the gap between the story we're told about a place and the reality on the ground. And by the end of this video, I think you'll see why I worked my ass off to get an EU passport. I grew up in what I'd later learn is a pretty typical American suburb with two-car garages, sidewalks optional, and enough parking to serve an impromptu Taylor Swift concert. We had all the markers of what I thought made this place heaven on earth. Applebee's, TGI Fridays, and then when the Best Buy came into town, holy hell, welcome to paradise. It wasn't until I began traveling regularly that I started to look at my hometown differently. The change started in college, where I could walk or ride a bike anywhere I needed to go around campus. Now granted, I ironically still needed a car to get to campus, but once I was there, I didn't need a car. And I loved not having to get into a car every single damn day to do virtually anything. But still, I thought this was just part of college, which is kind of a 4-year mirage anyways. After school, I knew I'd have to rejoin the real world and do all the normal things, including getting a house in the suburbs with a 2-car garage. Needless to say, I didn't end up normal. Fortunately, I had an older brother who was living in Chicago before I graduated college. I visited him and started riding around the L, the city's famous rapid transit system that whips you around the city while the dummies in cars inch along in traffic. I got a taste of a full life where you truly did not need a car. Not only didn't you need a car, it seemed to make life genuinely worse. So, I moved to Chicago after I graduated. But for reasons I still cannot comprehend to this day, I continued to own a car, even though I rarely used it. Honestly, I almost only got in the damn thing just to move it to the other side of the street to avoid getting ticketed by the weekly street sweepers. Even when I went back to Ohio to visit family, I'd often take a bus to Cleveland instead of drive. It wasn't until I moved to Cleveland, the actual city, not just a suburb like I grew up in, that I finally ditched the 2-ton financial albatross around my neck. Now for some people, this was a sign that I had truly lost it. Cleveland is not Chicago. Despite once being the 6th most populous city in the United States, today Cleveland is a fraction of what it was, about 1/7 the size of Chicago. Still, the two cities are comparable in that roughly a quarter of residents do not own a car. Unfortunately, Ohio's batshit bonkers state politicians have been suffocating Cleveland's public transportation budget. None of that deterred me. I grew to absolutely loathe cars and the idea of having to rely on one for anything I had to do in my life. So I sold it and never looked back. Now, although I found that I could live my life within Cleveland without a car, I grew frustrated with how inaccessible anything outside of the city was, including regional parks and Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Now, part of my outdoorsy origin story is that I wrote Best Hikes Near Cleveland at a time when my now wife still had her car, which she later sold when we moved to Costa Rica. I'd gotten into road cycling so I could reach those parks on long bike rides, but going on a hike or a trail run 100% required having a car. In Costa Rica, we lived in a small village with better access to public transportation and green spaces than anywhere I had lived in the United States. By the time I got back to the US, I knew I had to at least try moving someplace where I could access everything I loved about life without having a car. And that, sports fans, is what led us to Europe, where we've been for the past decade, blissfully free of the constraints that come with car ownership and living in an area designed around cars first. And to this day, I still count myself wildly privileged and fortunate to live in a place like this. But deep down, I know I have the suburbs to thank for getting me here. People sometimes ask me about culture shock going back to the US. A couple of months ago, I made a video talking about how it's this kind of suburban slop that shocks me the most whenever I go back to where I'm from or travel around the United States. Because this stuff isn't limited to where I grew up. It's everywhere. So much of the country looks exactly like this. The only character you can find is buried beneath the layers of asphalt, from the Ozarks of Arkansas to the Cuyahoga Valley, begging to be free and blossom like I find it does far more naturally across Europe. So let me take you back to where I grew up. Join me on a run through the suburb that made me who I am. Don't worry, you don't actually have to run, just, watch. So this is basically like the central area. It is pretty easy to get to on foot, but as you can see, like no sidewalks until just now. And this could be, with a little vision, a very lovely place because it leads right up to the lake. But instead, we've just got gas stations, drugstores, fast food, and massive surface parking lots. But it doesn't need to be this way. But again, growing up, I thought this was all completely normal, aspirational even. So I think what I could probably consider one of my first expressions of teenage independence was coming out to this park with the view of Lake Erie, hanging out on this little swinging chair. And now with these more mature eyes, it's traveled around the world a bit, it's lived in Europe for a decade, you just don't see people regularly walking around here. So growing up in this suburb, I just thought, this is normal, aspirational, this is the way it's supposed to be. And it really wasn't until I started traveling and saw most of the world does not get around by car. It's only relatively recently that we started getting around by car, and it's weird how quickly it became normalized that not only is this going to be the normal mode of transportation in a lot of the US, especially suburban America, but we're going to actively design for cars so that people can't walk.
And when you don't walk, you don't even know about the beauty of what's right in your own backyard.
So right now I'm running through what's called Veterans Park, and growing up I actually never went here because even though it's right next to my junior high school, legend had it that this is where kids would come to do drugs, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I was terrified with the notion, so I actually didn't even start running through here until after I moved abroad to Europe, to Germany. I always try to tell people that Ohio, the Midwest, and the United States is a very beautiful region if we haven't paved over it. Kind of an important caveat. But as things stand, this is actually just a tiny, tiny pocket in the area where you can see what the natural landscape looks like. And of course, to get here, 99% of people would drive. It's why I never came here.
Nearby, but not connected for anyone outside of a car, is Mentor Lagoons, a beautiful nature preserve along the coast of Lake Erie.
So what's nice about this trail is that it leads right up to Lake Erie, and you can really sense that this could be basically a national park or a state park. Again, if we hadn't paved over so much of it, because it connects to the Buckeye Trail, which wraps all around the state.
And if I could just magically make it so, I would love to piece together this whole region like I've seen across Europe, all designed in a way so you can reach these places safely by foot. The opportunity is there, and I think the desire is there. I've never met anyone who's traveled around Europe and said, way too many trains, or way too easy to walk around here. Americans, by and large, want this. I didn't make this video simply to bash my hometown. If I hadn't grown up there, I honestly don't think I would have reacted so harshly to car-dominated landscapes, serving on Cleveland's Public Transit Citizens Advisory Board, and eventually moving to Europe to become the best version of myself. From my health to the things for which I advocate. Even though it's not how I want to live today, it made me who I am and led to the life I have now. So for that, I truly am grateful. The real reason I'm making this video is because I want this place, this region, this country to get better. And I get comments all the time from other Americans and even the occasional Canadian who feel stuck in the car-oriented places they were born into. And it shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have to move anywhere, let alone overseas, to live a life with access to nature that doesn't require a car. Beneath the pavement, beyond the parking lots, and behind the strip malls, there is beauty here. We just need to let it bloom once again. And maybe, just maybe, more people will have the freedom to build the lives they want without having to leave. But one of the most surprising benefits of living in a more walkable, transit-oriented region is how much easier and even enjoyable it's made working remotely. In this video, I talk about why living in Europe is a remote worker's dream come true. And yes, meine deutsche Zuschauer und Zuschauerinnen, even with the Deutsche Bahn.